This is the Beyonce of instruments where I come from, which is Crete in Greece. It is a Cretan Lyra. It is a pear-shaped string instrument. Mine has the eagle in the back. Even though it has 4 keys on the top, this is an influence that came from the violin. In the past, the Lyra, which was a liraki in the past. I actually ordered a liraki that's on its way, and I will make a video when it comes because I'm just so excited about it. It used to have a flat top with 3 keys. Anyways, I have been playing for about 3.5 years, and I started when I was 20 years old, so I was very much an adult. And I kind of wanted to get on here and talk about what it was like and having learning hurdles from learning an Eastern instrument when you come into it with a Western musical perspective, because I started playing the lira when I was already a musician. This is not my first exposure to music, but also from learning as an adult, obviously. So a little bit about my background. I'm from Chania in Crete, which is in Western Crete. It is where the sirtos comes from. I'll get more into it about the music kind of stuff later on. I was obviously exposed to Cretan music growing up, but I did not have a musical upbringing in the sense of learning an instrument or being around people that play instruments. Fast forward to being 20 years old, I had already started a bachelor's in film music at Leeds Conservatoire, and conservatoires are music-only university. It's music and performing arts, so I was already surrounded by musicians. I already knew Western music theory. I went into the degree obviously as a composer, and I really missed playing an instrument. Before I started my degree, I used to play the piano. I won't say that it was a big love of mine, but when you are in the education system and you're taking the musical route, you have to play an instrument for some exams. And I chose the piano because it's very accessible, and I used to actually learn it on YouTube using MIDI tutorials. That pretty much carried my music education. I live in the UK, by the way, so I'm talking about GCSEs and A-levels. And then when I started my bachelor's in film music, I obviously entered the conservatoire as a composer rather than an instrumentalist, and my love for the piano really faded after my A-levels. The only musical playing that I had was playing on a keyboard that translated into MIDI when I was using a DAW, which for me is Logic Pro X. When I finished my first year, I did a 4-year degree. At the end of my first year, I really missed playing an instrument, and I was surrounded by people that played instruments as well. And I, at the same time, was very homesick about Crete because I live in England now. At that point in time when I was 20, I hadn't been to Crete since I was 18 years old, so I was very homesick, and I thought, you know what, why don't I combine my musicality, because I'm already a musical person, with my heritage and learn a traditional music instrument, and that's what I did. What's very interesting about the lira, and it's something that I love, aside from the fact that I love Cretan traditional music and obviously have to listen to it to study pieces, and the fact that I enjoy playing, because I do believe that you can be musically inclined and yet be incompatible with certain instruments. So I did at first, when I started playing, really just check if I'm compatible with the lira, if I enjoy physically holding it, playing it, learning, doing all the patimata, doing all that kind of stuff, and I did. So that was great. But it is an Eastern instrument, and I came into it from a Western musical educational background. So I knew, C major, G major, D major, A major, all that kind of stuff, and I could read partitura, like Western notation. And then I'm starting to learn this instrument where actually we don't have keys, but we have sabach and kurti and rast, which is like, they are makams, which is... Okay, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. Cretan music is a subcategory of Greek music. Think of Greek music like an umbrella term, and every region has its own distinct character. Obviously, there are overlaps. Like, for example, they do play Cretan Lyra in the Kyklades, I'm pretty sure. But every region is distinct. Like, for example, in Crete, we don't play the clarinet, but they do play it in other regions and all that kind of stuff. I don't know about Greek music in general. I'm very specific about Cretan music, but Cretan music, it is its own unique tradition. However, it takes elements from Byzantine music and Ottoman music. I won't use the term Turkish music because the Ottoman Empire was the empire of the Turks, but it was not a Turk empire. There were people from all over the world, and Greek people and Armenians and Assyrians, like all these groups of people affected the music. So I'm not going to say Turkish music, I'm going to say Ottoman music, just to make up for the fact that it was a very diverse empire and it had all these different musical influences. There's actually a really good book, I'm going to put like a picture of it, about 19th century Istanbul and the influence of Greek music on it, and it talks about Armenians as well. Like it's a very expensive book, keep in mind. Anyways, I'm going into like a whole different rant, and I'm not that's not what I'm here to do. If you were to color code Ottoman music as red and Byzantine music as blue, Cretan music is not half red, half blue. It's purple. The color purple is made up of red and blue, sure, but it is its own color with its own distinct character. That's what Cretan music is like. Even though we use makams, which are Ottoman scales, we don't use them in the same way that they use them in Ottoman/Turkish music. Like for example, say that you had Cretan musicians and you had Turkish musicians and you give them makams and then they had to improvise then and there. They would be using the same makam, but they would be doing different things because they have developed the makams in Crete in their own way. The way that learning the lira used to be in Crete was, I would say there was pre-Mountakis, who was one of the titans in the Lyra world Cretan music, and then post Mountakis. Before Mountakis, people used to learn with their ears orally. It used to be that people would go to panigiria or social settings where music was, which is pretty much everywhere, like festivals, weddings, baptisms, gatherings with a lot of people. All of them entail live music. Crete is an incredibly musical community. Every Cretan person has their favorite lira player, and Cretans know songs, they sing rizitika. Like there's a very strong sense of traditional music in Crete, which is very beautiful, and if you're someone who's into that kind of stuff, I would definitely advise going to Crete and seeing it. Though I will say, a lot of the places where the music thrives are kind of not gate kept, but they're kept in circles that foreigners don't really go to. Like for example, I went to a free concert that must have been 2 or 3 years ago in Chania, it was called Where Crete Meets Podos, which was a kind of fusion concert with Cretan music and Pontic music, and they had Mattheos Tsachoridis and his brother, I forgot what his name was, collaborating with Cretan musicians. I'll put a clip. It was actually so beautiful and well done. What was interesting is that it was free and the council paid for it, and the audience was packed with people, but it was all Greek people because they advertised it in the Chaniotika Nea, which is the newspaper. So even though this happened in the summer, it was actually Greek people only that went. And also in festivals like the Chani festival that happens every year, or they have the Tsikariasto festival. Again, they're advertised with Greek people, to Greek people, in Greek, in the Greek newspapers or Greek flyers. So you might struggle to find it as much as a Cretan person would if you went to Crete, but it was still very much there. Anyways, back to the Primoudakis. Primoudakis, people, first of all, every lira player would make his own lira. The idea of going to a shop or going to someone who professionally makes liras and sells them for a living was not commonplace. And what's interesting is the lira is best described as the instrument of shepherds, like people who are orini, like kind of not particularly close to other people in proximity, and that obviously has affected the lira because, like for example, it used to be played with a bow that has bells on it because lira players used to accompany themselves. And also people learned to play lira from using their ears by going to live music. But then Mountakis came into play. Mountakis was very influential. He kind of started the idea of being a lira teacher when you are a lira player, and he's basically everyone's teacher. Like everyone learns today using the Mountakis system in Crete, which is a notation system. I'm gonna come back to my thoughts. So the Mountakis notation system, I started learning with my teacher, who I found online, because at that point I have a second teacher now, I have a new one. My first teacher, Vasilis Hatzimakris, he used to live in London. He's from Iraklio. I found him online, and I used to have lessons in person, and I would have pretty much one lesson every week. I would practice every day, but up until my lessons, and that's kind of how we kept it up. But then I would go back to university, which was in Leeds, away from London, so it would be online. pretty much the first thing that my teacher established with me was, can you read music? Which I can read Western notation. So I always learned Cretan pieces written in treble clef. So I never learned the Mountakis system. But then I have my youngest cousin, she's 13 and she's also learning the Lyra now for a few months. And when I went to visit Hanya about 2-3 months ago, I saw her notebook and how she was learning Lyra, and I was like very excited to see how she's learning. And then you know the notes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si? She had those written with like lines and like tones, like, you know, a tone next to the letter. And I was like, what's this? And she was like, well, this is how we learn to read the music. And then I had, over the summer, like a bit of a meetup session with my current teacher that I've been with for about 2 months, Mountakis, who's also from Chania, and he has a YouTube channel here as well. It's called Cretan Lyra Lab. I was like, do you know what this was? Because I don't know what this is. Ναι. Ναι. Dad called and I lost my train of thought. And then I spoke to Mountakis, and he said that he explained to me what the Mountakis system was. So basically Mountakis was like everyone's teacher, and then he at some point went into contact with he went abroad and he saw musicians who played from reading music, and he was very amazed. So he was like, you know what, we need to start transcribing in our own way. And his transcription method is the notes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, just so that you get like a basic idea of the melody that you're going to be improvising, because Cretan music is obviously based on improvisation, and every Lyra player plays a sirto or whatever, a piece, let's say, in their own way by decorating it and doing all these articulations or whatnot. But the base melody is, you know, usually similar for every single person. However, it is a very counterintuitive way of transcribing, because you're not transcribing rhythm, you cannot transcribe the articulation. It is very counterintuitive, but I never had to do the Mountakis system because I already knew Western music theory, so I always learned on a treble clef, which became very useful. However, the world of the music theory that you learn when you study Cretan music was very unfamiliar to me, but obviously I was very interested because I really loved learning and playing the Lyra, holding it, practicing, learning about context, and listening to different versions of the same piece by different people and saying, you know, this guy did it one way, this guy did it the other way. Something that's interesting to note when it comes to dividing Western notation, you can't really divide Western notation against Eastern music such as Ottoman music, because at the start they were not transcribing their music, but eventually they did adopt Western notation to transcribe. So you can't really make a, you know, rigid distinction between the two styles and whatnot. It's very different because, for example, in Western music you use keys like C major, G major, D major, A major, whatnot, and there's sharps and flats. But in the Byzantine and Ottoman styles you have completely different systems. The intervals, the distance between the notes is really key in Byzantine and Ottoman music, whereas it's not that important or pivotal in Western music because there's really two types. There's the tones and the semitones, right? However, in the Byzantine and the Ottoman system, you have moria and then you have comma, which are numbered. But mind you, even though they are numbered in a similar fashion, so you have like the top and the bottom, meaning the wider the interval, the larger the number at the top, and the smaller the interval, the smaller the number, the systems are not equivalents of each other. For example, the lowest value as an interval in the Ottoman system is 4, whereas in the Byzantine system it is a 6. However, the 4 and the 6 are not the same. They're not equivalents of each other. So even amongst just the Byzantine world or the Ottoman music system world, there is variations and there's differences. And then mix into that Cretan music is not faithful to both of the systems because it borrows ideas and then it twists them into its own way. So it's very interesting but also very complicated when you come into it from a Western musical system. There's also other interesting things, like, for example, compared to, say, Western music, you have, say, usually the tonic, so the first degree, and then the other really important degree is the fifth, right? So the tonic and the dominant, which is 1 and 5, like V, I and V in Roman numerals. In the Cretan music tradition, there is the tendency of gravitating to the third degree, and then the melodic movement of a phrase is dictated in proximity to that third degree. So notes change almost as if they're gravitated to that third degree. So when you go up and down, the flats and the sharps are different. And mind you, it's not the flats or the sharps because they use both. So that's also something else that's different with Western music. Anyways, overall it's very interesting. But when I kind of struggled to mix the Lyra knowledge that I was learning into my other musical parts of my life, because, for example, when I was at the conservatoire, and this is kind of a hurdle to overcome learning an Eastern instrument, there was a workshop, and mind you, in the conservatoire there is a folk degree, but obviously that folk degree, well, it's not obvious, caters to blues and kind of folk for Irish and American music. And there was a workshop that they had on that was open to any folk musicians, and the whole point of the workshop was to play with other people. And I was like, wow, this is very useful, because me being in England and playing the Cretan Lyra, I was very isolated, and I never actually got the chance to play with a lauto player, for example, which is very important, right? So I thought, why don't I go and kind of learn what I can learn? But I kind of struggled to keep up because I was coming into it, like, even though I comprehend Western music theory, obviously, and mind you, like, I write, when I was at uni especially, I was writing orchestral music. Obviously, that's, you have the violins and the cello and the orchestra and the transposing instruments and whatnot. Like, obviously I know Western music theory, but I never applied it with the Lyra. So it would come to a point where they would say, okay, let's all improvise on G major, and I never applied that Western theory onto the Lyra, so I actually struggled to keep up. And then when I explained, like, okay, I know, I put my hand up, I was like, listen, I know these keys that you're saying that we improvise on, however, that's not what I do application wise with my instrument, so I'm kind of struggling to keep up. They were kind of like, they didn't understand what I was talking about. That was kind of a hurdle, and I kind of thought, you know what, like, I'll just stick to what I'm doing by myself, and I'm not going to try to mix it with other people, especially people that don't play instruments that are from a similar tradition, say Balkan, Middle East, North Africa, and all that kind of stuff. When it comes to hurdles of learning an Eastern instrument that is part of a group when you're isolated in England, like I am in another country, in the past, with my previous teacher, I would only learn how to play the Lyra, obviously, which I don't play any other instruments. I'm actually very incompatible with pretty much any of the other instruments in Crete, which are lute adjacent. I cannot, guitar, any sort of string instrument that you have to like play like this. I just can't do it. I've tried guitar before. I'm just completely incompatible with it. With my current teacher, I'm kind of exploring how to play with other instruments because he plays the lauto, and when I have a lesson, say, and we go through a piece together, which we go through it very quickly, thank God, because I know how to read music notation, Western music notation, because he would tell me his students that learn with the Mountakis system struggle to learn passages quickly because they forget it. Obviously, why would they remember it if they can't? It's not even just about looking at it and being able to remember what it is. It's like the notes, the rhythm, when you come in, because for a lot of Cretan music, you come in on an offbeat, but you can't mark offbeats because you're not marking tempo and rhythm in the Mountakis system. So thankfully, because I'm able to read Western notation, we learn passages together very quickly. And then in my second lesson, because he plays the lauto, he basically gives me a backing track to practice to, rather than me practicing purely on a metronome, which is obviously good for learning tempo and rhythm, but it's not productive when it comes to learning how to play with other people. You know, another thought that I had about the theory, there is terminology that is shared with Western music notation: diatonic and harmonic, chromatic. Those terms exist in Cretan music, but they mean completely different things. Diatonic and chromatic describe the intervallic range of a melody, right? A melody, say, on the Byzantine system is made up of a tetrachord and a pentachord, and then there's a diasastikos tonos, a divisional tone dividing them, and then you kind of build a melody using those kind of things, and then you just have to learn tetrachords and pentachords and then combine them and whatnot. But then in harmonic, for example, all it means is that it sounds Western. It means that they adhere closer to like the tone semitone system, would be like a tone and a half if you try to describe it, find an equivalent way of describing it with a Western perspective. Because I didn't stay in the Greek education system long enough to be very familiar with the Byzantine world and the Byzantine system, I personally prefer the Ottoman style, with like rast, sabah, rather than say protosychos, plagios του τέταρτου and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm gravitating. Very interesting about the Ottoman style. The comma system that they use, this is more interesting when you're a Greek person. The comma style is taken from Nicholas Mercator, who was a German mathematician. So in a way, you could argue that the Ottoman style is Western influenced because they took a concept and developed it when it came from a German. But then get this, the comma is originally an idea from Pythagoras. So it's almost like a full circle. Like if you're learning Cretan music from a more Ottoman lens, that doesn't make it more foreign actually, because the concept that they're using to measure the intervals is also originally Greek. While I'm at it, another interesting distinction between the Byzantine and the Ottoman systems, aside from the numerical system that they use to describe the intervals, is also how, and I think I read this in that book about 19th century Istanbul with the blue cover, was that in Byzantine music the central mode is protosychos, and in Ottoman music the central makam is rast. However, protosychos and rast are not the equivalents of each other. Protosychos is equivalent to usak. The last thing that I would say I find very fascinating, and I'm still learning it as I go, is the concept of melodic behaviors, because we don't really see musical behavior in Western music. And actually it's interesting, in the Byzantine system, which in a way, if you kind of squinted your eyes, you could say it looks like Arabic almost. It's kind of squiggles, like straight line, wiggly, da-da-da. The Byzantine system, those lines indicate how the melody moves up and down and by how much. Like you cannot start in the middle of a bar. Like if you said play from bar 4, you can't. You need to go to the beginning and see the starting note, and then see how it moves and where you end up, which I suppose is a disadvantage. But anyways, while I'm at it, I'm gonna say one more thing. There is this musicology papers on the Cretan Lyra and Cretan music. I've read them. They are trash. And at some point I got really kind of triggered over the summer, and I recorded a whole 40-minute video, and then I never posted it because by the time I edited it, I kind of got it out of my system. But anyways, there was there's this idea that Cretan music is this random jumbly mess. People brush it aside because it's improvisation based. They think that it just there's no actual system behind it. But the truth is that there is. Like for example, with sirta, which are the most common, pretty much 90% of Lyra music is a sirto. Sirta they're composed of two melodies, two themes, say A and B, and then they are divided in between song, poetry, which is madinades. So there is actually a system in what people are playing. It's never random. Anyways, there's a lot to say. I will make another video when my liraki arrives from Khanya, and I'll probably fill in any details that I missed here, because I kind of just wanted to talk about the lira in general and kind of spread my nets online and see if any fish get caught and I can meet people. And hopefully people that are English speaking, not that I have an issue with Greek speaking obviously, but there's a lot less information about the lira in the English speaking side of the internet than there is in the Greek, obviously, because we speak Greek and all that kind of stuff. Like for example, my teacher's channel is in Greek, which is great, but what if you want to learn about it from the outside, or you want to implement something from Cretan music into your own stuff? It's very difficult to learn at the moment. I would like at some point, obviously because I came into music as a composer, I write in a Western way. I would like to add the Eastern element of the lira into perhaps a fusion basis and kind of seeing what's out there. I mean, there is Daraki, I forgot her first name, but she mixes the Cretan Lyra with, I believe, trance and techno, which is quite interesting. It's not very attractive to me. I would like to see the lira in an orchestral piece, but obviously it's hard to do that off the bat, because you do need to comprehend what the lira is and how it plays, because to assign a piece that is made for a violin on a lira, to me is a waste. Like, there's no point in doing so. But it's very exciting, and I absolutely love this kind of stuff. I think if you are an adult and you kind of missed out on having a musical upbringing because of however you were brought up, like, you should never feel like your age is a deterrent or that it's too late, or be caught up on whether or not people think you look stupid or you sound bad at the beginning. I think if you chase music purely for a personal satisfaction, then you will always get it and you'll always enjoy yourself. Obviously, there are bad days in playing an instrument like any other. I used to have a lot of days where I did not feel like practicing, but I still did it because I had the energy. Now I'm a lot less, not committed, but I don't push myself as much because I've accepted that I'm in an adult phase and I work full time and I just can't do things the way that I used to do when I was a student. When it comes to learning as an adult, I will say I never had this complex about my age or thinking that it was too late and why even bother, and there's children that are more advanced than I am. My only issue started to pop up in my life now that I've graduated university. So I graduated in July of this year, 2024. It's fitting it with an adult life, which is for me right now working full-time. Before, when I was at university, I would squeeze in my practice time and my lessons in my schedule, obviously, and it was very easy. Like, I would have, I have class at 10 o'clock, I'm gonna book a practice room at 11 o'clock, and then I'm gonna have my daily practice sandwiched in my schedule that way. And obviously all I had to do was to organize my free time outside of my lessons, which for some days would be like an hour or maybe just 2 hours of a lesson, and then I had pretty much free time the rest of the entire day. But now that I work full time, I'm having a harder time, one, scheduling music lessons because I'm available less, but also making the time to practice, or rather having the energy to practice. That's the biggest thing about working full time and doing music things, any sort of music thing, because I'm also composing in my free time as well. I struggle to find the energy to practice. Like, for example, most of the days of the week I work from 9 to 6, and that's just the time that I'm at work. I wake up at like 6:50, and then I'm back home from work at like 6:30, 6:45. So the first 12 hours of my day are taken up by my work life, and then I need to eat and cook and prepare my lunch for the next day if you're trying to save money, and shower. I'm really left with really 1 hour to do whatever I want to do before I have to go to bed so I can function normally the rest of the day. And then I need to squeeze any energy that I have left after being completely drained from working all day. But on the upside, I work full time and I have my own money, so I'm able to buy cool instruments like a liraki that I bought literally 2 days ago. It's not really a Christmas gift, it was something that I've wanted for many months, so that's like an upside. But obviously the downside, I don't have time or energy to do the stuff that I want to do. And I will say, aside from the physiological benefits of playing an instrument, how it's good for your brain and all that kind of stuff, it's so precious to me. And to have these kinds of things that add happiness to your life, so that you're not just working and recovering from work by scrolling on your phone, for example, which I still do, but there's more to life than just working and recovering from work. Yeah, that's all I had to say. I kind of ran out of words. I will come back with a liraki video discussion as well, and I think I'll talk more about the lira as an instrument. Obviously, I'm not here to teach anybody anything. Like, I'm still a student. Even 3.5 years later, I'll always see myself as someone who's learning. But I think it's cool to put an instrument that was in the past quite limiting in terms of who saw it. Obviously, before the internet and globalization, who saw the Cretan Lyra? Ikritiki, right? But sharing things and stuff is very exciting. I need to practice today as well. Still recording? Oh, thank God. Oh.